Spoiler alert, this podcast is going to be discussing the newest trailer regarding Amazon's Wheel of Time. This trailer was released on October 27th of 2021. If you are spoiler averse, this podcast might not be for you. You've been warned.
Part of Double P Media, doublepmedia.com.
I'm Matt, and I have something to say.
I'm Bubba, and I have something to say.
Today, we discuss the Wheel of Time. Bustin, Blockbusters.
If you're going to be part of the White Tower, you need to have all your ducks in a row.
Welcome to Bustin Blockbusters. That's a double B. And my name is Matt. You can find me on this podcast feed all the time, which is part of Double P Podcast. Joining me is a man who loves to keep a dagger in his sleeve so he can drop it in his hand and stab you in the back. It's Bubba.
Matt, how are you doing? This is so exciting. After the success of the Lord of the Rings franchise and Game of Thrones, we are seeing an explosion of wonderful content set in fantasy realms, and this new one looks like they spent a fortune on it. Thank you for having me on.
Only Jeff Bezos could have made this happen. It's only his money that could have made something like this happen, if you ask me. But I do love the fact that you're along with me, because we should share that I have read the entire series, but I haven't read Brandon Sanderson's book, except for that one, the one where he finished the series. And I hadn't read any of the first few books since like the 1990s. So I had to reread book one, and I'm finishing up reading book two to prepare for this particular series, because I feel like what's going to happen, Rafe has already said that, there's going to be parts of books one, parts of books two, maybe even a snippet from book three in this series. And I do believe that that kind of preparation is what it's going to take, because I've already seen a lot of people pointing out Easter eggs that I have to go, and I have to go back into the wiki, and I have to go back into the books and look things up. So I know that I'm going to have trouble keeping up with most of the book fandom myself. But you have never read the series, correct?
No, Matt, I haven't. I like to point out that even though I was a huge Game of Thrones fan, I got into Game of Thrones honestly because I like soap operas. And people used to laugh when I would say that. I'd say, look at Game of Thrones. It's about people squabbling, people in love, parentage being hidden, and shocking reveals and shocking twists. That was all soap opera. And so that's how I got into Game of Thrones. But I especially never got into fantasy like this. I never read Lord of the Rings when I was a kid. It really seemed like something, dare I say it, a geek would do. And then I got into Game of Thrones, so I tried some other fantasy books. I tried Lies of Locke Lamora. I was like, I tried Joe Abercrombie's The Blade itself. I was like, So this will be a real test of how the show appeals to a non-fantasy person, a non-fantasy genre fan, per se. And I can't wait to see how the show does.
I am, for one, super excited about this. We'd already had a teaser trailer, which we brought to the Double P Media YouTube not too long ago, and we're going to be looking at the quote-unquote official trailer this time around, which was released on October 27th of 2021, for those of you who have found this in some kind of time capsule 200 years later. And this is what we did in the 21st century. We sat at home in fear of a virus at this time, and we watched streaming services exclusively. Well, that and sporting events. That's pretty much it. And so as Bubba puts his mask on to protect himself from my venomous words, as they usually are.
Matt, you've read these books. How long have you been waiting for this series?
This is an interesting question, Bubba, because I hadn't really given, once Game of Thrones came out, and I started getting into that when the Brandon Sanderson book finally came out. I think it was 2014 or whatever. I had pretty much left this series behind. Game of Thrones and George R. R. Martin was much more of a priority to me. And so I started worrying about, is George going to get a book done? The answer is still no. But nonetheless, I was so worried about that it didn't even dawn on me that somebody would want to turn this very sprawling, epic, very comparable to kind of a cross between Lord of the Rings and Star Wars in a lot of ways in terms of character points and plot points. But it gets interesting. And the thing that is unique about this series is that in almost all other fantasy realms, you have the men doing all the magic, the men doing all of the power, save a witch here or there who dabbles in it darkly, doing the dark arts or whatever. Here, basically, this female group of people who perform magic or who use what they call the one power, they're essentially the Jedi in this. And that's what I really love about this series. And I love the women having the power. Have you heard any crosstalk, Bubba, about this series or anything that would create an interest for you in this series other than just, me hitting you over the head every 5 minutes saying, hey, Bubba, come on the podcast. Hey, Bubba, come on the podcast.
Because of my love of Game of Thrones, I have heard people talking about this series, and they actually debate this series. And I've watched some YouTube videos talking about how it could be hard to get in. The series itself could be hard for the uninitiated in that the first book has a lot of brilliance, but also just a lot of things that might slow you down. I don't know if it's okay to jump in and say this. Going into this trailer knowing nothing, knowing absolutely nothing, not being a fan of the source material or even knowing the source material, this gave me such a heavy Lord of the Rings vibe. When you're talking about, and I forget the name of the villain, but it feels like it's a dark one, and that feels like a very generic villain name. The one power, which feels very much like the Force, like you were saying. So those were kind of my thoughts. But watching this trailer, I just thought of other properties. And so I think one thing the show, The Wheel of Time, will have to do to rope in the uninitiated like myself is show how it's different. And I love how you just explained that this the Wheel of Time Jedi group is a order of women. So I thought that was a real nice twist. But I feel like the trailer, I'm not sure I would have gotten that from the trailer. And I think the show does have to differentiate itself in this crowded media landscape. So I think it was a good trailer, but I think it in some ways felt very heavily, these are fantasy beats. Okay, this is our fellowship, where she says in the trailer, one of you 5 will have the power. Okay, somebody on the fellowship will have the power. So I'm excited to talk about it, but I haven't heard much crosstalk at all other than people on Twitter saying, oh, I love Wheel of Time. So that's all I have for you.
Right on. Well, I understand, and we're going to see how much we love Wheel of Time more or less after we break this trailer down, or whether your excitement has built or diminished. I feel like that we maybe need to just talk a little bit about what we're doing as a podcast network, because Bubba, you have built this thing up from the ground, basically on the assumption that you could do it better than me, and you have achieved that. You used to hang around with me on Podcast Winterfell all of the time, and then you said, hey, I'm going to start this thing, and now it's me coming to you, begging you to put me on your feed from time to time. But you've been covering some great things this fall that people need to check out as well. I loved Only Murders in the Building. I thought that was a fantastic series on Hulu. And also, you guys have been covering the first and hopefully not final season of Why the Last Man Standing, or Why the Last Man. So tell us a little bit about those podcasts.
Well, we are in an abundance of riches. There are shows targeted to everybody. And if I say, hey, I'm not a fantasy fan, but I'm still very interested in the Wheel of Time, Maybe you're not a mystery fan or a true crime podcast fan, but everybody loves to laugh. Steve Martin, Martin Short, Selena Gomez made Only Murders in the Building out on Disney Plus / Hulu, depending where you are in the world. And that's a really fun series. We broke down that murder mystery week by week, episode by episode. And similarly, maybe you're a fan of post-apocalyptic shows with a twist. Well, Why the Last Man is an apocalypse show where all the men die, save one. And it's a fun show we've been breaking down as well. We're all part of the Double P Media. Double P stood for doubly packed podcast. So it was a triple P, doubly packed podcast. Anyway, we love talking to you guys about your greatest stuff and about things you're interested in and celebrating them with you. And we hope you'll subscribe, and make this show a part of your weekly enjoyment of this new upcoming series.
We very much hope so. We want you to subscribe wherever you find Double P products, such as Parsec Passion podcast, which will be covering the Book of Boba Fett this December. I know that I will probably return for a couple of things that return in 2022 as well, like Babylon Berlin. We'll do Babylon Berlin Babel. And
we cover The Crown season 3 or season 5. Oh my goodness, I'm selling us short.
The Crown season 5 on Podcast a Little Bit and on the Double P Podcast Network, which look for Double P Podcasts. That's where you can find the catch-all for a lot of shows. And you will also find individual podcast feeds as well for House of the Dragon, which is coming up in 2022. So look for the Joffrey of Podcasts.
Well, Matt, you and Holly are going to be talking about a show that is going to be doing season 3. That's His Dark Materials from our friends at HBO and the BBC. That great show is going to be coming out with season 3. We hope they'll finish that effect work by 2022. So once again, if you're interested in all the riches of television shows we have now, please just search for @DoublePHQ on Twitter and Instagram, and we'll hook you up with some great shows.
Ladies and gentlemen, the infomercial is over. Woo. I assure you, we are finally done with all of that podcast business, except to say this. We really care what you think about this trailer, about this series, and we want you to contact us. Now, you can tweet me by tweeting at the word bust, Blockbuster. That's B-U-S-T, Blockbuster, on Twitter. I know that the cast is called Bustin Blockbusters, a double B, but you could only put so many characters in there that weren't already taken. And so Bust Blockbuster is what you get with me. Remember, you can always complain to Bubba about my podcast if you wish by tweeting to at the word double, the letters PHQ on Twitter, or you can send messages to him on Instagram. You can find this feed at dreadfulpodcast.wordpress.com. You can also find all episodes of anything that I do at Matt's Audioblog, MATTS, audioblog.com. You can send emails to me, mattsaudioblog@gmail.com. And don't forget that Double P Media has a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/double, the letters PHQ. That stands for Podcast Headquarters. And you can find out everything else about the podcast by going to the word double, the letter P, media.com, including their YouTube. Just search for Double P Media on YouTube, and that's the way you can find those videos. One other thing, as I continue to run on with the infomercial, I want you to join my Discord server. Please join my Discord server, because a long time ago with Podcast Winterfell, and this is how I actually met Bubba, I used to host things called fan call-in shows, where I would let anybody call in and talk to me about the episodes that we had just seen. And if I hadn't met Bubba, then I wouldn't be podcasting right now, because nobody else would take me at this point. So, Bubba wouldn't be podcasting right now because he wouldn't have been allowed to come on and realize how much better at it that he was than me. However, fan call-in shows is what I want to do, but they're only going to be on our Discord server. And the only way you can be part of the Discord server is to use the permanent link that you can find at mattsaudioblog.com. You can see it. It just says Discord on it. And you just click that link and it automatically adds you to the server if you're already with Discord. And then at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturdays, after a new episode airs for The Wheel of Time, you can join in on your Discord server. Come to my server part, and you can join the voice. They have little voice channels. This one is entitled Fan Call-In Show. You just log in there, and you're in. And then we just talk about the show, which will be fun. But let's just get into this trailer, Bubba, because I've already talked and rambled enough. So I divided this trailer up into essentially 12 segments. And the 12 segments made it bite-sized enough, I think, for us to be able to talk about it. It's not the world-famous frame-by-frame analysis that you're used to doing with Catfish on other Double P podcast medias. However, I just don't have time for that. You can testify to the fact that it took me forever just to put together a doc in order to just talk about it in this way. So I can't even imagine skipping to frame 395 out of 43,322. The first clip, each clip's about 10 seconds to 20 seconds long, somewhere in there. The first clip, we have our main character, one of our main characters. Her name is Moiraine. In this clip, she is called Moiraine Sedai as well. And that is something that's very important, but we're going to talk about her. The first shot is her just, it looks like she's standing, she's in white, she's preparing herself for something, or she's concentrating on something. And then we see her in a place that we call the White Tower. And essentially what the White Tower is, it is the home. It's on an island called Tarvalon, which is, the White Tower is the home of this Jedi Order that we were just speaking of earlier, Bubba. It's the home of what we call the Aes Sedai. And the White Tower is where all of the governance, all of the ritual, it's almost like the Jedi Academy on Coruscant is essentially what it is. And Moiraine is going into the main audience room, and she takes hold of this rod. It's called the Oath Rod. And it is something that all Aes Sedai, which is the order of mages or whatever you want to call them, that live in this world, they must swear 3 oaths, essentially, to this rod. And I think the rod, because it's magic or something, might bind them to it, not unlike the way that there's a certain kind of swear that you can do in Harry Potter that if you don't keep it, you'll die. It's one of those kinds of things. But the leader of the Aes Sedai is called the Amyrlin Seat, and she tells Moiraine to swear her oath. And she says, "I swear to speak no word that is not true, to make a weapon with which one person may kill another, and to never use the one power as a weapon." So, on the whole, those are pretty good promises to make, especially if you're someone who can seemingly wield power, as this trailer reveals Moiraine to be able to do, right?
Matt, if it's okay, I just want to talk about a couple of things. Number one, this actress. We have been following her since 2002, when Rosamund Pike appeared in Die Another Day, a James Bond film. She's also been in that Pride and Prejudice, one of the many versions they've made. And I think a lot of people who aren't familiar with this source material, like I'm not, are going to see her and immediately think, hey, Gone Girl's in this series. And I think that's a very comforting thing to somebody who doesn't know the property, like I keep saying, that, oh, wow, we've got a real heavy hitter, a real knockout as a lead actor on this show. The second thing that I would say about this segment that we're talking about now is when you hear somebody say, kind of, I swear to speak no word that is not true, to make no weapon which one person may kill another with, and to never use the one power as a weapon. To me, that feels like she has to break all 3 of those, right? Like the Night's Watch, the Night's Watch oath in Game of Thrones, and apologies to listeners who don't want to hear too much Game of Thrones talk, but that oath was written because the author knew, I'm going to have this person who believes in honor and holding your vows sacred and stuff would be forced to break all those vows. So that's why you create the vow like that. And not knowing the story, I don't know if this is going to happen. And you say, okay, she's holding a rod or whatever it is, which prevent her from ever breaking her word. But to me, you only have those 3 things stated if she's going to break them. So I hope that's not a spoiler, but that's immediately where my mind went when I saw this section of the trailer.
I think there's a good perception of that, because there are things actually that are from the books. And I don't think that, if I recall correctly, we don't actually see this oath made by anyone until book 3. But there are a couple of omissions in this particular quote that I do not know if they will be included later or not. Maybe just a trailer clip cut them off or what have you. But for one thing, I always think, I will speak no word that is not true. Well, pardon my politics, but today, every word you say can possibly be interpreted as true by somebody. And so right there is kind of an out for any Aes Sedai. It's like, well, I believe this to be true, so I'm going to.
Oh, wow. This is great. And then, hey, it's not the weapon which killed another person. It's their lack of blood that killed them, not my weapon. We're going to find legal loopholes in all these things.
There are all kinds of loopholes in these oaths, I believe. And to never use the one power as a weapon, there is a particular omission that I think a lot of podcasts and whatever are bringing up, which I feel like we should hear too.
Okay.
The full oath is except in defense of myself or defense of the Aes Sedai. So that is when the one power is allowed to be used as a weapon. And maybe the clip just cut that off.
Always a loophole.
Always a loophole. That's the point. Any other thoughts about this first section, Papa?
Another thought that's only coming to me because you mentioned this group is a bit like the Jedi. Well, we know how Anakin did with those rules in the Jedi. So, are we going to have a dark member of this group? Oh, scary.
That's an excellent question to ask to see. And some of it just may be point of view. Everything is the truth from a particular point of view, as Ben Kenobi tried to sell to Luke Skywalker. Moving on to clip 2, and folks, if you're watching this on the YouTube presentation, you will see these clips as we discuss them, as well as some stills from those. But the next clip has Moiraine, the one that we know as an Aes Sedai, and some other practitioners, some other members of the Aes Sedai with her, and they seem to be wielding this kind of white whispery power. That is the one power. You can see it kind of going around the oath rod as well in the previous clip. And this time she's got a pretty good handle on some stuff in between her hands there. And she is looking, it seems to be, to look at this guy who is in a cage. And this guy is an important character. He actually doesn't appear prominently until later on, but the showrunner said he's moving his storyline up a little bit in the series in order to establish, rather than thinking that only women can wield this power, men can too. But when they do, it tends to have really destructive consequences. He is what the Aes Sedai would call a false dragon, and there's a reason for that. There's a prophecy. We won't get into that right now. But there are essentially two sides of the one power. There is the Saldar, which is the side that the women use, which is very powerful when you focus it, but it also comes from a more passive place, i.e. the light side of the Force. And then there's men who use Saidin, which is more of a rage, a torrent kind of force that is hard to focus, yet is very powerful when used. And those are the two sides of the one power. So just like Star Wars, you have a light side and a dark side of the Force in this particular series. Now, there are other Ajas in this clip here with Moiraine moving everything around, and you'll notice that they're all wearing different colors. For instance, Moiraine is wearing her blue. You see someone to her left, which is wearing red. Her name is Liandrin. She is a member of the Red Aja. Was clever. Red and red. And then a member of the Green Aja. I believe this is a character that we will know as Alana as well, but I don't want to say that specifically because there's lots of Green Aja running around all the time. The Red Aja's main goal is to find people like Logain, this gentleman who's in the cage, who can seemingly wield this one power, and to help to neutralize them. We'll discuss what each colored sect does in a moment, but that essentially is the Red Aja's thing. Yet Moiraine is here right now, seemingly leading the group, which is pretty interesting to me. And any dialogue that you hear under these shots is actually just previously finished from Moiraine's oath from the prior clip. Any thoughts about how the power looks? Does the magic look cool to you? That you can physically see it being drawn and such, Bubba?
It looks fine, but it also looks what I would call typical. A lot of properties that have these fantasy elements, even Harry Potter, which you mentioned before, they have to find ways to visually show the magic. And so to me, it looks typical of what you would see in a fantasy/magical film or entertainment property. I have a question for you, though. You keep mentioning these names or these groups like the Aja and the Alana. Are these names that the fandom of Wheel of Time series have agreed upon pronunciations, or are these things that once we get into the show, they'll say somebody's name or a group's name and everybody will go, oh, that's not how I had it in my head?
You're going to have your fair share of mispronunciations, particularly from this host, for sure, until once the show establishes how it's to be told, because I don't know a single soul who pronounces Brienne's name as Brienne yet. If you just listen to the audiobook, you might tend to think that that was the case. The show did not. And so what we will do is, as we go through these pronunciations, as the show distinguishes them, we will try to pick up from that.
Also, just one note, and I don't mean to be negative or shed a light on it, but I mentioned how this trailer really feels like it's hitting what I would call typical fantasy beats. And now that there's like, okay, the red group and the blue group and the green group, that also feels very true of fantasy, of witches, of fantasy things where people get divided into color. In the Oz fantasy books of American fantasy, the lands of Oz are divided into certain colors. You're mentioning their color grouping, and I think to myself, is this the blue Power Ranger and that's the red Power Ranger? So I think the costumes look good, but when you pointed out the colors, I did have that kind of pull of like, I don't know. Now, once again, Wheel of Time fans, please do not take these comments I have in any way of insulting. I'm just saying first impressions from a noob watching the trailer.
I think that those are great impressions to make, because one of the things when I first learned about, and this was a long time ago, but when I first learned about Ajas and their different sects and the fact that they were, they were represented by different colors, I instantly thought of Saruman the White, of Gandalf the Grey,
great point.
of Radagast the Brown. These were the kinds of things that they do represent, and I think they're intended to invoke those kinds of tropes in a way. It was the one way that I feel like Jordan could get away with making this a much more feminist approach to fantasy, was by throwing in some of those kinds of tropes.
Matt, can I ask you another question, just as a newbie trying to find out how this is playing? And maybe you mentioned this in your teaser coverage, but are these characters looking the way you imagine them to look? As somebody who doesn't know the world, I would assume Rosamund Pike's character of Moiraine is an important figure in the book series. Does she look the way you imagine her to look? Does this man in this cage that seems to have some kind of magical bars, Logain, is that it? Does he appear the way you imagined him when you would read the novel?
I think for the most part, they've done a pretty good job. They did a great job making all of the characters outside of this area from which most of our main characters come from, which is called the Two Rivers. I felt like that everybody seemed cast pretty much to spec of what I expected in the book.
Wow.
Let's move on to clip 3 here. And we have a person who is basically explaining what the word Aes Sedai means to us, because we don't know. What the heck is Aes Sedai? How do you even spell it? Is it an I like I? Is it Sedai like some kind of fabric coloring? No, it's Aes Sedai, Aessedai, which in the old tongue, according to this gentleman, meant servants of all. So once again, we're trying to paint the Aes Sedai as good people. The ancient Jedi Knights who have served the galaxy for 1,000 generations is basically what this is. And one of the things that I really like about this is that people were trying to ask if this was a particular character that becomes prominent in the books by the name of Tom Maryland. And one of the things that I think that our listening audience will find funny is I can't tell you if that's Tom Maryland or not, simply because I don't know who the actor for Tom Maryland is supposed to be. I know that there was a shot of him playing a guitar or a lute in one of the earlier trailers, and I think I see him fighting a Trolloc in this trailer as well, but I can't tell you that this is the same guy because I don't know the actor, I don't know the actor's face, and I'm too lazy to look on IMDb, quite frankly. So there you go. But at any rate, there are some people who are saying that it's Tom Maryland. I really think it's just a warder who's in service of another Aes Sedai. We'll get into what the warders are. They're paired up with Aes Sedai to protect them when they can't protect themselves, when they're trying to do some other kinds of magic that don't allow them to defend themselves. Warders are people, they're not necessarily bodyguards, but they do serve the Aes Sedai, and they're generally men. Moving on, you get another ceremony in what we call the White Tower on Tar Valon, where all of the Aes Sedai hang out, the Jedi Academy. This is the ceremony, and it looks like Moiraine looks a little bit younger here. She's wearing this particular headpiece, which will be a lot of interest to book fans. I don't want to say too much about it if you're just a TV-only person. It's just, there are certain things when a Aes Sedai is learning how to use magic, they can find certain items that will help them focus their concentration through that magic. And the piece that Moiraine is wearing over her head, that's what they call an angreal, or an angreal. And it's kind of a focuser of the one power. It probably helped Moiraine to first learn how to use the power that was within her, or to access the power.
Matt, it's so interesting that you had mentioned that this feels like a ceremony of a younger Moiraine. I couldn't tell that, but I did think that looking at Moiraine, that she was using Just for Men hair coloring, because her hair is an unnatural darkness. And I thought, I'm getting a little gray, right by here by my ears. Do I need a little Moiraine's, do I need Just for Men to focus the one power to give me back my natural dark brown hair? So we'll see.
Psst, this is an edit. Bubba has earned the first ever fake Holly laugh. This is used when someone makes a joke where you don't know whether it's going to go over or not. You will hear this used often for me when I make bad or inappropriate jokes. That's the end of the commentary. Psst. We will have to beg her forgiveness. She does not use Just for Men.
Okay.
She uses Just for Aes Sedai.
Oh, okay. There you go.
And so, moving on, we're in the White Tower still, where we have Aes Sedai kind of hanging around, and they're being taught. And there's, again, you see all of these different groups in this one room together. There's 7 different sections. This is where I'll get into talking about the colors. If you're wearing yellow, you're generally a healer. If you're wearing brown, you're kind of seeking knowledge. You're the people who write down stuff. You're the librarians. You're whatever. If you're a green one, you're the warriors. You're the fighters. The reds, they're kind of like the police. If people are using the wrong power in the wrong way, the one power in the wrong way, the wrong way power, then they're coming to the rescue to do the arresting. The gray, they're the diplomacy and politics people. The blue, which we notice Moiraine is, they focus on righteousness and justice, and the whites focus on logic and philosophy. So they're the ones that are off in the corner, never paying attention to anybody else.
You say that, but how Brown gets no respect. Brown, what is your special thing? We seek knowledge. okay, they're the dummies who, the rest of us.
No, they're perhaps the most important. They ask all the questions so that it can be answered by everybody else. I mean, if not for their questions, nobody starts seeking answers.
Listeners, reach out to us on Twitter or social media and tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me what color I should be in this Aes Sedai group right now.
You have been seeking knowledge about this trailer so far. We will keep you in the brown group.
Oh, no, there you go.
Moving on to clip 4s. We have the leader of the Aes Sedai. I'm going to butcher this name because I never could think of how it was said when I was reading the book, but I think it's Siuan Sanche, I think is how you say her name. She is what they call the Amyrlin Seat, and that is the leader of the Aes Sedai. And then we have a title card telling us, hey, this is based on Robert Jordan's books. They were great. This is going to be great too, more or less. And then you have Moiraine, who's looking out, I think from the White Tower, perhaps not long after she's gotten this assignment, and then she's horse riding because she's been assigned. And she says, I didn't choose this path, but I will follow it. And then you have Moraine's warder. He is her protector, her companion, who does things for her. His name is Lan Mandragoran, and we've talked about some of this stuff in the teaser trailer before, but just to reiterate in case, Bubba wants to know more, and obviously he didn't listen to my podcast regarding that, and so I want to make sure that he's educated. But he asks Moiraine, where to next? And she says, we need to go to the 2 rivers. The old blood runs deep in those mountains. Well, what does she mean by that? Well, first of all, the 2 rivers is a place where 2 rivers connect, obviously. That would be pretty obvious. But it's also a place that was a very part of an old land, and that's what she means by the old blood, is that there is a great deep history to this world, and some of the heroes from the past have come from this area of the 2 rivers. So that's why she's saying that. And that covers pretty much that clip. Bubba, what questions or observations do you have about this one?
Now, once again, Wheel of Time fans, don't beat me up, but these lines that you pulled, Matt, are very much fantasy tropey lines. I didn't choose this path, but I will follow it. The 2 rivers, the old blood runs deep in those mountains. And why do I say they're fantasy trope lines? People don't speak like that. Certainly in modern day, you don't hear anybody say, the golden arches, the old blood runs deep in those fries. It's like people don't speak so poetically. And so, people aren't talking kind of generically about deep thoughts and deep things. And so perhaps this is a good thing. Certainly The Lord of the Rings has been so popular. Why not appeal to that type of audience and appeal to that type of feel? When the characters in the book speak, do they kind of say lines like this, these kind of prophetic hero lines? I didn't choose this path, but I will follow it.
It is written, the entire text is written in this kind of way that is not modern whatsoever. Okay. That's just the way that they speak. It's the way that they think. It's the way that the descriptions are written, even sometimes by Robert Jordan. It's very immersive in that way, in that it totally pulls you into that world, everything from the descriptions to the way the characters speak to everything else like that. If that's a turnoff, I could understand that. But on the other hand, I don't want Lan saying, hey, where are we going? And for Moiraine to say something like, I don't know, let's go where those dudes hang out. I don't want any of that.
I understand. I own, I'm a bit older than maybe some of our listeners. So I own all those extended editions on DVD of the original 3 movies in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So I can get into this. It's just those lines don't feel necessarily so specific. They feel very, a hero's quest type lines, right?
Exactly. They are very much hero's quest kind of lines. Typically they're not done. I made a Star Wars comparison earlier, but typically you don't, when you read them, or even when I've been hearing them in these trailers, I don't think of George Lucas. I don't want to say to these people, faster, more intense. I don't want that to happen. I want those words to be savored, to drip, basically. So that's one of the things that I really like about the way that they're doing this series so far. Any other questions about that, or should we move on to clip 5?
Let's keep going.
All right, clip 5, we're going to see Egwene.
Say that again third time. Third time for the
third time's a charm. Egwene is her name.
Egwene? Am I pronouncing
Egwene? Egwene is how I would pronounce it.
Okay.
It seems weird, but that's how I would say it. She is a resident. Here we had Moiraine just talking about the Two Rivers. Mm-hmm. She is a resident in the Two Rivers area.
Okay.
And she is a fairly young woman. She wants to become what they call a wisdom. This may be another fantasy term that you're familiar with, but a wisdom is basically the female representative of all of the women in a township or whatever. She's kind of a political leader for them. They listen to her. She's a teacher. She's a scientist, a meteorologist. They ask her to predict the weather. She's a healer. She's the medic. She's the nurse. She's the doctor.
Let her get some sleep, people. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we see is Egwene is spinning in this water. Mm-hmm. She's kind of doing this little twirl in the water. Now, in the teaser trailer, there was a shot of her emerging from that water.
Okay.
And she had all of this great paint, just these brilliant colors all over her face when she emerged. So this is part of some kind of ritual that is going on here. And I believe now I can narrow it down, because at the time when I was just thinking, okay, well, this could be something from the third book. This could be something from any book, really. But now that we see that her companion with her, or at least seems to be in that same cave area where she comes up out of that water, is Nynaeve, who is the actual wisdom of the place where Egwene lives. And so this is some kind of coming of age ritual, I think, that we're seeing for Egwene being done, because Nynaeve seems to be supervising it in a way. And she is the wisdom of Two Rivers. She's the one who has to do the predicting of the weather. She's the one who has to tell the mayor to get in line and think about the women. She's the one, she's the doctor. So that's Nynaeve, pardon me. And then we have Egwene again. And this time she's got a coat on. She's dressed for warmth. She's in this kind of hall. Based on the windows, I'm thinking that maybe it's a location that we'll be talking about a little bit as we go through once the journey kind of begins. I don't want to say too much about that right now, but if you have a question, I won't deny you the question. Lots in this shot. And then there's a shot of Rand, Perrin, and Mat. And these are the three stooges. These are the guys who are friends. They are also from the Two Rivers. Think of this as like Frodo and Sam, and I don't know if it's Merry or Pippin, but it's one of the two of them. So this is who these guys are in terms of the Lord of the Rings. And they are also from the Two Rivers. And we see, or we hear Moiraine say, let's hope it's prepared them for what is coming. And we see a horse, and then we see a Myrddraal, or some people call him a Fade. I'll get to that back in a second, but what I want to just focus in on with this dialogue, because we're stretching this out so much, she's hoping that the old blood is what is preparing these people for what is coming for them. So just so if you're keeping up with that. Now, the Myrddraal is that creepy, ghostly looking guy that's sitting on top of the horse right at the end of this clip here. And they have no eyes. They're very weird looking creatures. They are part of guess what? The Dark One's army. And they kind of like are the little mini generals of the Dark One's army. They run another group of people who are actually could probably take a Myrddraal out when you look at the size of them, but for some reason they just listen to what the Myrddraal have to say. So the Myrddraal are kind of like the captains, the lieutenants, whatever, and we'll talk about the Trollocs here in a minute. Any questions about these guys? By the way, Bubba, Rand is the gentleman who has red hair.
Okay.
Perrin is the one who looks like he's the tallest of them, has a little bit of a beard. And Mat is the one that looks like every other word that's going to come out of his mouth is going to be smart aleck. He's got the mustache. That's Matt. So he is Matt Cauthon. Perrin is Perrin Aybara. And Rand is named Rand al'Thor. That's not Randall Thor. That's Rand al'Thor, meaning he is of the Thors. But his first name is Rand.
Matt,
any questions?
Matt, you said it. When you see these three guys, what appears to be drinking in a tavern, you definitely think Lord of the Rings. But now that you're telling me one is named Rand, one is named Perrin, and the third, they like ran out of names, and they're like, who's the third guy? Matt. I guess that's Matt over there. Like, hey, where's my fantasy?
With only one T. With only one T. Okay. Yeah, that makes it all the difference.
That's pretty good. And then the other thing is you're mentioning these wisdoms who are political leaders, scientists, healers, meteorologists. I just know at one point somebody's going to come up to Nynaeve. Is that how you would say the person's name?
I call her Nynaeve.
Nynaeve. Okay, perfect. You're going to come up to Nynaeve, and she's going to have let this fade into the two rivers, and somebody's going to say, Nynaeve, you had one job.
Psst, this is an edit. Bubba has also earned the second fake Holly laugh of this podcast, and the second fake Holly laugh ever. Back to the podcast. Psst.
Okay. Wait for laughter that doesn't come, but that was my thought. But also, once again, this feels very, it almost feels tropey of fantasy. Of course, the evil force is going to come to this idyllic village. It's what we want out of fantasy. We want our heroes to be, to face huge challenges, to be thrown out of their everyday lives. And so this feels like it would have to happen in this type of story. Now, Matt, it's so fun when you say things like, oh, this could be from book 3, this could be from book 2. It feels like something like this, hey, we're happy here in the two rivers, and then this fade comes to town. That feels like it would have to be in the first book. Am I right there? Or
that is correct. When they're all together, it's pretty much it pretty much has to be from the first book. I was merely talking about when we first saw the scene with Egwene in the teaser trailer.
Right.
There's really not any reference to that in the first book.
Oh, okay.
So that's the part I was talking about. The rest of this stuff definitely feels like it's the beginning of a story. Mm-hmm. I would even say, as most trailers tend to be, I would say that most of this stuff that you're seeing in this trailer, or at least a good portion of this stuff, for sure, would be in the very first episode, even maybe in the first 20 minutes.
Oh yeah, no, that's probably true. I could see that.
Moving on to clip 6. Is that where we're at? Yeah, clip 6. We have this blackout, then we hear Moiraine saying, "The Dark One is waiting." Ooh. Waiting for what? That's interesting. Then Lan is leading everyone as the lights come back up. He's leading at least Egwene and Matt into what looks like this ruinous city, which is where I suspect, based on what Egwene is wearing, I suspect that she is wearing that coat that she's wearing tends to make me think that the place that we saw her in with the windows in the earlier clip is probably the same place that this city is in. And that's all I'll say about that. Then we have a shot of Egwene on her horse, and it looks like they're actually in a different kind of village. Mm-hmm. Then Perrin is in a hall of some kind, or maybe in the same kind of place that Egwene was in an earlier clip. My absolute favorite clip from this, or little shot from this trailer, is Nynaeve doing the hair flip, because nothing says badass like a hair flip these days. Psst, this is an edit. Matt has finally earned his first, but definitely not his last, fake Holly laugh. Back to the podcast. Psst. Moiraine then says, "But there will be one who can stand against him." And then you see Matt drawing a sword or a dagger of some kind, and you see Rand drawing his bow. He's always pulling his bow out and pulling on a string, because Rand likes to pull strings. And then you have Moiraine, who says, "And it's one of the 5 of you." Whoever could she be talking to? Well, she's talking to Rand, Perrin, Egwene, Matt, and Nynaeve. So there you go. We know that all 5 of these characters are now from the Two Rivers, and now they've all become part of a much bigger world that they're going to be thrust into, not unlike Luke Skywalker becoming much bigger. And there's even some other parallels there with another character that I won't discuss right now. But at any rate, then you see at least Moiraine, Rand, Perrin, and Egwene, and Matt, they're riding their horses real hard, right alongside a river. And then I think that's Lan kind of bringing up the rear there, kind of guarding the rear, so to speak, or whatever. I don't think that that's anybody chasing after them specifically, although I'm sure that they feel like they're being chased. I just don't feel like that we're seeing what the actual threat is in that particular shot.
Matt, once again, I'm talking tropes, and I apologize, but the Dark One is waiting. There will be one who can stand against him. And a part of me wants to say, well, of course, there's got to be one who can stand against him, or we wouldn't be seeing the story. The story isn't the Dark One came and slaughtered the people who tried to stand against him. Maybe that is the story, because there are so many books in this series, that maybe that is the story of book 1 or book 2. But it obviously one has to stand against them. And I wouldn't have a guess now of which one I would suspect would be able to stand against the Dark Lord, except I would assume, based on the Jedi kind of being female, I would assume maybe of this group, maybe the female would have the chance to stand against the Dark One. That's a guess.
You're going for Rey instead of Luke is basically what you're going for.
Yes. Have you seen Rey? She's cute. Let's go. Hey, I'm ready.
And Rey's a badass. And so therefore, it definitely helps when you're taking on the Dark One. So your vote is for Egwene or Nynaeve?
Well, when you do a hair flip, that's almost a sign that maybe you've. How about this? Are the tropes going to be subverted? I don't know. How long ago was this book series written, man? When was it written? In the 80s?
I believe the first book was published like 91.
Oh, okay.
I think I was still in college when it was published. And I wasn't concluded until 2014, and that was after Robert Jordan had already passed. But he left the stuff for Brandon Sanderson to finish for him.
Even those horses riding along the river, this is a very hard Lord of the Rings feel. You just can't avoid it. And maybe they couldn't avoid it in the show. Maybe they don't want to avoid it. But once again, that's what these shots evoke.
Yes, I agree completely. And if you feel like you've already seen Lord of the Rings once and you don't need to see it again, then I could see how a lot of these things that you're pointing out, Bubba, very well, and I appreciate you doing so, but I can see how those could turn some people off.
Well, again, so I think they want to pull on that audience, because that was a huge audience that loved those films, loved those books. But you do have to find your uniqueness to it. It's like got to be 80. It could be 80% Lord of the Rings, but the 20% has to be unique and stand up on its own.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. Moving on to clip 7. After Moiraine, it's funny how I don't know if this actually goes right after Moiraine has said this stuff to them about it's going to be one of the 5 of you or not. But Matt, in his typical way, which is not my Matt typical way, but his typical way, says, "You've fully lost your mind." And then I think we have a shot of Perrin and Egwene that are sitting on the ground, and Rand looks like he's looking over the plains of a cliff. Does he want to jump? No, he doesn't want to jump. But he doesn't look very happy. Rand is the redheaded guy. He's the one standing there at the edge, and he's kind of looking out over things like he doesn't really want to be there. And Rand has issues that everybody will grow to love as we go along. We hear Moiraine say, "Your life isn't going to be what you thought." This is kind of like Gandalf pulling Bilbo Baggins and everybody out off on their adventure right off the bat. Then you cut back to the village, and I believe the name of this village is Emmonsfield. I think this is still the Emmonsfield village. That is in the center of the Two Rivers, where all of these kiddos are from.
Okay.
And Lan looks kind of skyward, and he spots some flames coming down the mountain. He alerts Moiraine, and then Egwene asks, "What is that?" And Moiraine says, "His army is coming." Whoa, now we get to get into some fun stuff, where we see that the army is running down the side of the mountain. These guys are mean looking. We see a Trolloc close up. He is better than your average orc. He's definitely he's got some goat to him as well. They all have horns.
Okay.
He's breaking the door down, and he's attacking Rand and Rand's father, Tam. There's this quick shot of Perrin in the middle of this asking, what can we do? And then it goes back to the Trolloc and Rand fighting. You see Tam, Althor, is drawing this blade, and Rand is pulling, shooting, looking like he's going to shoot with a bow and arrow. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't recognize him, that is Roose Bolton. That is Michael McElhatton.
That's how I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is Roose Bolton there. He plays Rand's dad. And you get to see him fight a Trolloc, likely in the very first episode. So, as you saw right there. Any thoughts on this? Now that we're starting to get into some action, naturally, you're going to get some Lord of the Rings vibes from, anything from Helm's Deep to just chasing them across the wastelands or whatever as we go through this series. But how did you like the looks of everything on this, Bubba?
Well, to me, it really looks like Mr. Tumnus is pissed off. Hello, Lion Witch in the Wardrobe reference, another fantasy thing. So I do like that these aren't orcs, that they do look more like the monsters from the fantasy, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe from Narnia. But it is, and I'm not saying it as bad, but it is evoking things we already know. So this makes perfect sense. And the fact that you're saying this happens in the first episode actually encourages me as a newbie to think, okay, good, we're going to hit some of these tropes, then we're going to be taken somewhere on an epic feel like we really want from these fantasy epics.
Excellent. And we do get taken away. We get taken away into the fog on a horse as we get to our next shot on clip 8. A horseman's riding quickly into the fog in the woods, and then there's a person who collapses into another person's arms. I could not tell for the life of me who this was. I tried zooming it up. I tried everything I could. I tried to recall the story. I still could not figure out who the heck this is. So that shot is going to be a complete surprise to me, whoever that is. That just kind of falls over and somebody has to catch him.
Matt, if people think they know who this is in the trailer, should they go to the Discord channel and put the info there?
They can. You can submit feedback that way as well. Just to find the link at mattsaudioblog.com, mattsaudioblog.com. There's a link for the Discord. Go in there, join up, find the Wheel of Time thread, and just put it in there. Don't just go screaming into the voice channel if nobody's there, because nobody will care. Because nobody will hear you. But do join the Discord, because we really want to have a conversation with you there. You can also tweet to @BustBlockbuster, or you can tweet to @PHQ on Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
After we get this person collapsing, then we hear Egwene say, we need to, this is to answer Perrin's question, I guess, from earlier of what do we do. But she says, we need to protect the people we love, no matter the cost. You actually see a shot of her face as she says, no matter the cost. And then we see this like holdfast out in the middle of this pretty desolate looking setting. And then another shot of Lan and Moiraine, and they're approaching this door, and the door's being opened. And once the door's open, it looks like that the door opens to like this veranda where there's somebody else standing out there with their back to us.
Ooh.
Any other thoughts about that part of the trailer?
No, a horse racing fast through foggy woods. This is the wheelhouse of fantasy. Let's roll.
All right. Moiraine in clip 9 says, our enemies are everywhere. Fancy that. As we get shots of women, this woman, she's being burnt alive.
Ouch.
For crying out loud. Ouch. The enemies everywhere. And then we see this man in a white cloak who's just having dinner. Seemingly enjoying, I think, the same festivities. That's pretty scary. And then he's in this white cloak. And then we also see this white cloak close up. I want to tell you who these people are, Bubba. They're called the Children of the Light. Or that's what they call themselves. Other people call them white cloaks.
Okay.
They are people who do not like Aes Sedai. And there are many people throughout the world who do not trust the Aes Sedai. The White Cloaks believe that, how can I put this? They're religious fanatics.
Aren't we all?
They believe in... You cannot unsubscribe for this podcast.
That's right.
Until you subscribe.
Heck yeah.
That is the philosophy here at Double P Media. Moiraine then says that they will leave no one standing. Which army is she talking about? Is she talking about the Children of the Light? Is she talking about the Dark One's army? And you would think that the Children of the Light would be against the Dark, and the Dark would be against the Light. But I don't know. It's a strange world. Then we see Lan, and he's in white on his own.
Okay.
And it looks like he's in his knees. He's on his knees, and he strikes his shoulder, and he's either in pain or he's mourning or something like that. And then we see Moiraine. She's kind of in that same position. She's got like she's just struck her own clavicle. And she's either crying because it hurt really bad or because she too is mourning. So that could be something that's happening right there. Maybe they've had one of their own perish. Maybe they're just sad because the Dark One's going to win. Who knows? Maybe they're sad because they will leave no one standing. But that's what we see there. Then we hear someone say, we've lost too many people already. Turns out it's Rand.
Okay.
Then we see a village, and then we see Rand as he says, I can't lose you. And then we see a very strange thing. Remember that white cloak guy? There's a whole bunch of people that are dressed like him that seem to be circling Egwene and Perrin. We haven't seen too much of Perrin, except when he asks things like, what should we do? We've seen a lot of Egwene in this trailer, but she's got her face to the camera. I think that's Perrin with his back to the camera, and it appears they've been captured by the Children of the Light. Oh no, what could happen there?
Terrible.
Will they burn Egwene alive?
No.
Well, they burned this other girl alive, it seems like, so why not Egwene?
Just bad luck for her. How about this, Matt? As someone who seems to know these stories so well as you do, when you watch this trailer where you see this scene of somebody being burned at a stake, it looks like to me, can you in your mind think, oh, I bet that'll be like episode 5, I bet that'll be episode 9, I bet that'll be episode 3? Like, do you know the story well enough to where you can guess where some of these shots will happen in an episode?
I will counter that question with another question.
Oh,
Bubba, have I ever been that good at anything? No. The answer is no. And so, no, I couldn't tell you where this is coming from. A lot of these scenes, I'm like going, is this an interpretation of something else that I do remember? Is this, I couldn't, some of the scenes I can actually say, okay, this has to be in the first 2 episodes. Otherwise you can't get to this scene, which will be in like the 5th or 6th episode. But I wouldn't be able to tell you, like, okay, this has to be in this particular scene. We know you've done it before where you said, well, this will probably happen here or there, especially with Game of Thrones stuff. I'm just not that good, Bubba. But thanks for asking. I appreciate it.
Well, let me say that Game of Thrones, those stories, I keep mentioning soap operas, event A had to happen before event B could. So if you were seeing a trailer based on a novel, you could kind of figure out where in the season it would come. And it almost was quite easy. Are these novels written that way where it's not that maybe 5 people go off on their own adventures and they could layer those in at different times? Is this a very linear story where, okay, this has to happen, then that has to happen? Can you spoil me on that?
That's a great question, Bubba, because there are things that get filled in later books that are recollections from either the time that you saw stuff in the story before, and I don't know. If you want to call this retconning, I guess you could, but I don't think so. I think it's very creative the way that Robert Jordan did most of these things. Like he thought of that history first, but he chose to leave it out of the first book. Just like George Lucas started with 4, 5, and 6. Because 4, 5, and 6 would be no fun, especially 5, if you knew who Anakin Skywalker was in 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, if only Lucas knew who Anakin Skywalker was in 4 and 5 when he was making them the first time. But sure, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense.
So that's why I still watch Star Wars 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9.
Okay.
Every time. Moving on to clip 10. Egwene says, "You won't," as in Rand, "you won't lose you won't lose me." And then a Trolloc is attacking Egwene, which tends to make us think, well, maybe he will. And he's attacking Egwene and Nynaeve. And then I think you see Nynaeve fighting back a little bit. Moiraine then says, "If we do not stop the Dark One now." And then we get a shot of a crew at this stone structure or some kind of structure.
Ooh, I love it.
Looks like a big
structure.
horseshoe.
Yeah, I love it.
It's the place for the National Horseshoe Championships.
No.
That place is called a Waygate, I believe.
All right.
Waygates are kind of interesting little passageways that you can go through. Again, very fantasy realm. But I tend to think of it as just the way that Littlefinger got around real fast in Game of Thrones. Psst. This is an edit. Matt has achieved his second fake Holly laugh and tied Bubba with 2 fake Holly laughs in this podcast. Back to the podcast. Psst.
No, come on. Are you saying it's a magical Waygate? It looks like something that should have some magic tied to it.
It does have magic tied to it.
Okay.
And there's a whole thing about that. Then we have a Trolloc attacking. Remember when I was talking earlier about whether I saw Tom Maryland or not, or whether he was saying that line or not? Pretty sure that in that building, when we see the Trolloc attack a guy from right to left, the guy is standing on the left. Pretty sure that's Tom Maryland. He is the one who is doing. You would have probably seen him plan a loot just a few minutes before, but now he's going to have to break that loot over that Trolloc's head if he's going to survive. So that's basically, Tom Maryland is basically a bard. He's like the bard character in your Dungeons and Dragons game that you play on Saturday nights, or used to when you were in college. So, but he's a little more interesting than that, but I won't say anything more. Egwene is then running through the woods. Moiraine says the whole world will burn.
Whoa.
And then we see Trollocs and more Trollocs and more Trollocs, and Moiraine says, "I can't allow it." And then we see her setting fire to a Trolloc using the 1 power. She gets all that white wispy stuff going around on her, and then she crocks it up into flames, and then she shoots the flames at this one poor unsuspecting Trolloc who was only there because, he didn't have any PTO. The Dark Lord did not give him any. And he had to show up to work that day, and he's the one that buys it.
Go into the calendar, go 000 for out of office, Trolloc, you'd be fine. Matt, I want to say that, I joked about these creatures looking a bit like the creatures from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe of Narnia. But these shots of this Trolloc attacking, to me, there were some shots in this trailer where I was like, oh, man, they spent some money on this. This looks great. And so I was very, very impressed with it. How do these Trollocs, do they come across on screen as you imagined them when you were reading about them?
The truth of the matter is, Bubba, is that I never had a good sense of what a Trolloc looked like the whole time I was reading the book.
Oh, wow.
Because not unlike orcs, many of them look very different. And so I just kind of became, okay, dude with horns. And, or if not horns, then dude with hoofs. So you either got a centaur or you got, dude with horns. And so I am amazed by these shots. I think that these shots are absolutely fantastic. I love the amount of detail. I also love the fact that Rafe brings up that a lot of these things are not CGI. Much like the JJ kind of thing, it seems to me that he made an extra effort to use, at least while filming with the actors, and maybe some visual effects were done over the top of these prosthetics, but he used a lot of just makeup work in order to make these as real on set as possibly could.
No, it definitely looks that way. They're impressive. Now, let me say that Moiraine saying, "I can't allow it," and her setting fire to a Trolloc using the 1 power, has she not just broken one of the 3 things she said at the beginning? Or does
that
a Trolloc,
is a very good question.
Or does a Trolloc isn't a person, it's a creature, so it's okay to use the 1 power to take a sucker out? But naturally, I would think you would have to. So action is what kind of brings the Neanderthal, who maybe isn't into thinking man's fantasy, into the game. And so I don't want to say I'm a Neanderthal. Maybe I'm a slightly developed Trolloc, but I love these shots. I thought they looked great.
I thought they were great too, and very tense. If you didn't see so many shots of these main characters in there, and like me, were familiar with the story, then I can see how you would feel all kinds of peril around our main characters who are dealing with these guys. Moving on to clip 11, there's 2 shots of Logain in this particular clip here. One, he's like surrounded by these bars or something, but they've got like lit jewels or something on the top of them. It's some kind of ritual cage in a way.
Yeah.
The other one is using the one power to stop an attack on him. That's great. You see the knife you see the dagger come down towards his shoulder. And you see all this white power going around, and you see these snips of black power too. You see this black smoke around him. Some podcasts have speculated that this was what they call the taint, which means that any time that someone who is a male, again, if they try to access the Sidene, I think is how it's called, then it's something that they can't control. I just think of it as the light side and dark side of the Force, and I figured they needed some kind of visual representation of that. So I don't know what I'm going to call it for sure. Something we see next after that is the Green Aja. I think that's I don't know which Green Aja that is, to be perfectly honest, and I'm not going to give them a name because I'm not sure. All Green Aja are badasses. Just remember that.
Sure.
They're the warriors. They're the battle people.
Okay.
And she's doing this one that's such a cool effect. Just the dirt. It's almost like she's creating an explosion in the ground that's going to ripple towards you on the camera. It's just like all of the dirt is just flying up from the ground. It's defying gravity and it's coming right at you. Then you have the shot of some men pointing crossbows. They're pointing those crossbows at somebody or something. They're holding their crossbows in a much more professional manner than Tyrion ever did.
Oh.
Psst. This is an edit. Matt has earned his 3rd fake Holly laugh for this podcast. He has now surpassed Bubba. The score is Matt 3, Bubba 2. Again, the fake Holly laugh is for questionable jokes. In this case, Matt should never try to be as funny as the Joffrey of podcasts. Back to the podcast. Psst. And then, he didn't measure up when it comes to holding a crossbow.
Nope.
And then a battle in the snow.
All right.
Whoa, a battle in the snow. Hoth? No, not Hoth. I believe that this is actually something from the recent history from where our things start. And I'm not going to say too much more about that, but that history will reveal something about one of our characters. Maybe one of our 5 that Moiraine says could be the one to stand up against the Dark One. Could possibly be. But I think that there's something key in those shots. Just know that probably none of our main characters are in peril during that particular battle. That's all I'll say in regards to that.
Okay.
But it's very important to one of them. Then, let's see. Then I guess we see a shot of Rand pulling his bow again because, Rand's always pulling strings. And then overhead from the White Tower, basically we're looking down on the Amyrlin seat, going to her Amyrlin seat. And we see that it's now the tower is on the inside of the logo, which becomes this great snake. And you see the Wheel of Time. The snake, by the way, if you hadn't seen the Moiraine clip that Amazon released, I guess about 2 weeks ago, maybe, she's wearing a ring. And the ring that she wears has a snake very similar to that. That particular symbol, the snake that almost seems like it's starting to eat its own tail, yet wines and everything like that, is the symbol for the Aes Sedai. It's something that all Aes Sedai wear some kind of insignia of on. And we hear the words, "The wheel weaves as the wheel wills." I always had a hard time.
That is a tongue twister.
I was going to say that's not easy. Not even for a professional broadcaster like you, Bubba. Especially not for an amateur like myself.
I love the idea of this show. One thing that I love is something I don't know. I still don't quite understand, and I remove the word quite. I don't know why I put that qualifier there. I have no idea what the Wheel of Time is. Is it a rhetorical thing? Is it a symbolic thing? Is it an actual Wheel of Time that somebody can control? I don't want to know, but that title of the series has always intrigued me. And so a snake eating its own tail, that is a fun image of the Wheel of Time. So I'm excited. I think it's a pretty strong trailer. I know there's a couple of shots after the show title card comes up. But before we even get to those, Matt, what's been the reaction of the Wheel of Time fans online? Are they excited?
I think most hardcore fans were very excited by some things, somewhat let down by some other things.
No.
There's a particular character which doesn't seem to get a whole lot of attention, that people are waiting to see how much attention he gets in the series as well, and no trailer has really confirmed it or not. He is not your average kind of guy.
Okay.
He's, just put it that way. And his inclusion in the story is very cool. So everybody's hoping that he gets included, particularly the group of people that he comes from.
Okay.
Is very interesting as well.
Fascinating.
We will have to see what that means.
Let me try it one time. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills. All right, faster. Yeah. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills. Okay, that is tricky. You can do it, but it is the
wheel weaves as the wheel wills. As the wheel as the wheel.
The wheel weaves as the wheel wills. Will the wheel weave as the wheel wills?
Bubba always tries to make a podcast funny because I'm incapable of it, and he just accomplished it. Clip 12, the final clip after the show logo. Perrin asks Egwene if they're ever going to get to go back home. Is this ever going to be over? Are we ever going to get to go back home? And just to let us as an audience know that that's not likely. We see the Myrddraal, again, call those Fades. Those are the eyeless guy. And Trollocs, all together, you can call those guys Shadow Spawn if you want. They're the Shadow Spawn army. You see Matt looking pretty terrified, Matt Cauthon. You see Lan doing some stabbing.
All right.
You see Trollocs, you see Moiraine wielding some one power. You see Matt and Perrin doing some stabbing. Then you see 5 or 6 people look like they're pitchforking something. I don't know. It's like they all came in. Were they doing a dance? Were they just getting the pig for dinner? What were they doing? I'm not sure. And then you have Rand naturally being a big camera hog, blowing out a lantern. He just blows it all out. And then we go back to Egwene and Perrin, and she basically says, home? No.
We're not going home.
Yeah. So that's the completion of the trailer right there.
Matt, you know that Double P Podcast has done coverage of the miniseries Jonathan Strange and Mr. Knurl. And so when I see anybody blow out a flame, blow out a candle, blow out a lantern, I think, okay, they're getting rid of the spirits, as that show is. And if you're into fantasy at all, admittedly fantasy set in our world, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Knurl is a great miniseries and great book. But I think this trailer accomplishes what it wants to accomplish. It sets up the idea that, okay, there's the Dark One out there. We have this group of 5 who are going to have to confront the Dark One, and one of them should be able to, or at least we hope will be able to withstand the Dark One. I love the look of these things you call the Fades. I don't even want to try to pronounce the Myrddraal or however they are pronounced, but I love the look of them. They almost have some Guillermo del Toro type horror look of these eyeless creatures that I like. And so I think it accomplishes what it needs to. What were your overall impressions on the trailer? Are you more excited, which is what a trailer's main job is? Are you just as excited, like the trailer didn't bump you up more or less? Or were there things in the trailer that made you, a big fan of the book series, question, hey, are we going to get what we need?
That's an excellent question, Bubba. I don't think that I was turned off by any aspect of the trailer. And I think that some of it just looks fantastic.
Okay.
I wish that I was one of these persons that read all of the books once a year, every 10 years, like
Right.
Peter Jackson or something like that, so that maybe what I feel like, and I will go and listen to other podcasts like our friends at TV Podcast Industries who will be covering the show as well.
Great guys with very fake accents, but great guys.
Yeah, they when you're from Philly, you just can't do that, man.
I know.
You just can't.
Not right.
But, that's all right. You go ahead and try. Anyway, the whole idea of, I just keep going back to, what am I missing? There's something here, that I'm missing. I just know that there's something that I'm missing. And I just haven't reacquainted myself with the books often enough or more thoroughly enough in order to be able to answer those questions. So I'm sure that our friends at TV Podcast Industries will do a better job than I did in terms of that. But I'm excited. I'm excited for this series. I can't wait to hear from people, to tweet at Blockbuster on Twitter or at the word double, the letters PHQ on Twitter, and tell us what you thought of the trailer. I can't wait until people check in with your Facebook page, Bubba, at facebook.com/double, the word double, the letters PHQ. I can't wait to hear from folks and who join the Discord and leave a comment and tell us what you thought of the trailer. And we're going to get 3 episodes on November 19th. From what I understand, there's going to be 8 episodes total. There is an 8-episode order.
Okay. But
I'm only seeing reference to 6 episodes right now. In fact, I remember you asking me the question, are there only going to be 6? And the authority on all of this stuff from a fan side is really dragonmount.com. They're the people who keep track of all of this stuff better than anybody else. And so they're who I refer to. And they claim that there were going to be 8 episodes and that the last one we would get would be, I don't know, like Christmas Eve or something like that. So I'm not going to make everybody call in on a fan call-in show on Christmas. We'll do it a couple days after that if we do a fan call-in show. But, of course, you're all off work.
Hey, this is something we've been waiting for a long time. And I say we, as I'm now joining the community.
So I really appreciate you coming on, Bubba. Don't forget, folks, the Book of Boba Fett is coming. You also have the last episode of Why the Last Man to Date coming out. They'll have some coverage for that. Look for Double P Podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Hit the subscribe button. In fact, let's just do this. I'm going to do a contest.
Oh, wow.
I don't even know what I'm going to give away, but here's what you do. You screenshot you being subscribed to either at Double P Podcasts on whatever podcast app that you're using, or to Parsec Passion, or to the Joffrey of Podcasts.
Oh, my goodness.
Or to The Dust, or to this podcast, Bustin' Blockbusters.
Heck yeah.
And if you send me at Bust Blockbuster a tweet with a screenshot, you'll be entered into a contest to win something cool from this podcast regarding the Wheel of Time.
Wow.
That's all you need to do. And Bubba, I want to thank you for your time. I know that you're going to be a very busy boy. That's a double B throughout most of this holiday season. So I don't expect you to be with me on every podcast, but you're welcome to come on any time and talk with me about this show if you wish.
I can't wait to see these first couple episodes coming out in just a couple of weeks.
It's just 3 weeks away, folks, basically. And you're at Fit and Trim, FITTENTRIM on Twitter. Once again, I'm at Bust Blockbuster. See ya. Okay, thank you.
Give me 10 seconds. Give me 10 seconds, mister. Give me 10 seconds. I'll be out the door.